The third Division 2 video I ever released was about a concept that most agents vaguely understand but don't really talk about by name. It's a concept I've coined build efficiency. This is a way of analyzing builds to determine how to get the maximum output out of your build, especially if it is a hybrid. With the changes over the past year to how brand set bonuses work, especially with the recent TU22 changes, this definitely warrants a revisit. Stay tuned to see what the best ways to boost your build are in this new season. Hey agents, it's Dispatch. Welcome to the channel where we talk about the math, builds, lore, and game design of Tom Clancy's The Division 2. Let's get stuck into it. Welcome to part 2 of our build efficiency explainer. We'll talk about what this concept is, why it's important, and then apply it so we can use it in our builds. I will not be including seasonal modifiers in this video. I honestly haven't had any time to unlock them or break them down. If I remember correctly, they also are going to be changing every season, so there isn't much point in including them in this video. Let me know if you'd like me to do a full modifier breakdown every season. I can get on that if that's what you'd like to see. On with the video. So what is build efficiency? Each type of slot in our build has a different value. Obviously, talents provide the most benefit to our builds. Minor attributes provide a lot less. Other types of slots also have different values. I came up with the general hierarchy. Gear talents are better than weapon talents, which are better than core attributes, which are about 1.5 times as much as brand bonuses, which are about 1.5 as much as minor attributes and mods. We used to be able to see this clearly with headshot damage. Minor attributes were 10, brand bonuses were 15, so the ratio between the two was about 1.5. Same with brands to core attributes. Sokolov, Fenris, Araldi, etc. would give 10% weapon damage to a particular type of weapon, whereas the core attribute would give 15%. Brand bonuses also had pretty consistent power no matter how many pieces they required. An armor regen bonus was always 1% whether it was from the 1-piece Bellstone or the 2-piece Golan. Therefore, unlike gear sets, brand sets didn't exponentially increase in power the more you invested into a particular brand. This allowed you to run 6 different brand sets without losing power compared to running 2 brand sets with 3 pieces each. However, this has changed. Changes to brand sets have increased the power of brand bonuses the more you invest in a particular set. Bellstone is still 1% for the first piece, but if you invest in 2-piece of Golan, now you're getting 1.5%. This is going to make our analysis a lot more complicated. Now it's not just a straight ratio of bonuses to each other, now the amount of pieces necessary to achieve that bonus also plays a role. So why do we care about build efficiency? Well, each slot in our build has an opportunity cost associated with it. Putting something in one slot means that this slot can't be used for something else. For example, with the damage skill build that requires skill haste, should we prioritize skill haste brand bonuses or skill haste minor attributes? For Brazos, if we only use one piece, we get 10% skill haste. A minor attribute, on the other hand, actually gives us more in this scenario at 12%. We would expect the brand bonus to give us 18% if it was on the efficiency curve. So in this scenario, we'd be much better off switching to a different brand that includes skill damage. We could also invest further into Brazos to unlock higher efficiency bonuses, such as the skill tier in this case. Build efficiency gives us a quick way to determine if we could get more out of our build and helps us figure out exactly where we should put our attributes for maximum effect, and allows us to do this without calculating out the entire build. If you've seen any of my build videos or build reviews, you know I talk about this a lot. Check out our playlist if you want to see those. Unfortunately, a lot of brand bonuses have been absolutely decimated in this update. In most cases, running a one piece is now not going to be good whatsoever. In my original video, I was able to make some big generalizations, but now with these changes, I'll have to be more specific. Minor attributes haven't changed. This means most of them are now more efficient than they were previously, simply by now being relatively looking better in the comparison with brand bonuses. Let's talk through each type of build and what options are available. We're going to look at the options for each type so that if you decide you want a particular stat on your build, where you should put it. We'll occasionally look laterally at what those attributes are competing with in that particular slot. Crit builds got hit very, very hard. 15% critical hit damage already wasn't that efficient, as we'd be hoping for 18% if it fit on the efficiency ratio. Instead, we've gotten hammered to just above a minor attribute at 13%. Jessica, once a bastion of efficiency, is now below par. I know 2% doesn't seem like a lot, but when crit builds require so much investment, it's a pretty big issue. Coyote's Mask kinda got a stealth buff here, simply by comparison. Since we're more crit starved, Coyotes helps us make up the gap. We can still absolutely take Cheska, as it might allow us to just break at an even 50 or 60% on our build. It's not terrible because it is still better than a minor attribute, and the other damage brand bonuses kind of suck, as we see with critical hit damage. Which brings up the alternative red stats that we can have on our build. We'll set headshot damage aside for a second, since we're not looking to put that on a crit build anyway. Instead, let's look at weapon handling, a very underrated stat in the crit meta. Weapon handling has gotten big buffs. Brand bonuses, instead of giving 10%, now give 15 or even 30%. Weapon handling includes accuracy, stability, swap speed, and reload speed. The thing about this, though, is that most weapons don't need all of these. SMGs don't really need stability. ARs really don't need accuracy. MMRs really need stability, but both don't need accuracy. The only type that really needs all of these attributes is LMGs, which have long reload times, heavy recoil, and poor starting accuracy. I mean, with any weapon, handling certainly doesn't hurt, but we're talking about bare minimum to make the weapon not annoying to use. Rifles, most of them really need stability and accuracy to be usable. Why do I bring this up? Because some bonuses only help one of these components of weapon handling. Weapon mods only affect one of these for the most part. So you might think that a weapon handling attribute is worth 4 or maybe 3 times as much as a stability attribute or an accuracy attribute, but really this isn't the case because not every weapon needs all 4 or 3 of these attributes. So what are we left with as far as weapon handling? Well, given that 15% is being the 1.5 times ratio, brand bonuses are actually now better for weapon handling than minor attributes. This goes double for 30% weapon handling bonuses. Like if you're running 2 pieces of zoo and can afford another piece, that's a massive difference in the weapon handling, especially for a rifle. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to every weapon in a particular weapon type. I saw a build the other day on Reddit that had 3 pieces of zoo and 2 pieces of Overlord for a whopping 30% weapon handling and an extra 30% accuracy on top of that just from brand bonuses. However, he was using the UIC. The UIC has literally 0 recoil and very high accuracy. It has some visual recoil, but the reticle always returns to the same point before the next bullet is fired. It also has a very fast reload time. So the only weapon in the game that literally doesn't benefit at all from weapon handling in any measurable way is the one they used. Make sure your build makes sense and isn't a meme. Of course, when we talk about weapon mods, the magazine slot is pretty much always going to be taken up by the biggest mag that you can put in there. It's pretty much always the best. Don't pick anything else. So while brand bonuses are very, very efficient, you might not need them. Don't invest in them if you're wasting other attributes. Given that you can target a particular weapon handling stat through weapon mods, these are now the most efficient way to get what you need. Talking about specifics for a second, in my opinion, running the 12% weapon handling mod, the Reflex Sight, is going to be best in slot for LMGs, as is the second piece of Petrov after Contractor's Gloves. These are both very efficient. For the weapon mod, considering we need reload speed and stability and accuracy, the weapon mod is like having 36% of any one of these attributes. When it comes to the second piece of Petrov, this will probably be competing with an exotic for any gear sets build, so in that battle, it might actually lose. And don't forget the Omega Suppressor, which gives extra stability for an extremely minor optimal range loss. Let's double back to crits for a second. Crit chance weapon mods used to be the most efficient weapon mods, but now critical hit damage mods got a buff, so they are exactly as efficient as critical hit chance. Both of these are now engulfed by weapon handling mods, so I would prioritize at least one weapon handling mod for whatever your weapon needs, and then you can put the other two to critical hit chance or critical hit damage to get your nice even crit number that you want. Let's talk briefly about weapon talents as far as crit and handling. ARs recently got a buff to on empty, and all weapons got a buff to killer. On empty is ridiculous now. It rivals stabilize for top tier handling, but I think it might be more handling than we really need with ARs. It gives reload speed, whereas stabilize does not. Stabilize can be kept up fairly easily, but is annoying to do so, but on empty can't re-proc during the duration of the buff, so we won't have perfect uptime with that either. I touched on this in my video about the PTS. In terms of minor attributes, stabilize is about 7.5 weapon handling minor attributes, as is on empty. Killer is about 6, Vindictive is about 4, but also benefits the team and is harder to proc. So for something like the F2000, Stabilize or On Empty are great choices. I personally favor On Empty for that crazy reload speed bonus as well. But there is strong competition with the other buffs as well. Killer has to be top for solo play for most weapons. You can use 2 weapon handling mods on your weapon and still be ahead 48% critical hit damage and 2% critical hit chance by switching off minor attributes. Bonkers. The only thing that beats it in terms of damage is the status effects talents of Sadist, Eyeless, Ignited, and Thunderstrike, which give more damage than Glass Cannon. That is crazy. Weapon talents are now competing with chest talents as the highest damage part of your build. Speaking of chest talents, this also means that Braced is completely worthless. Just slap on one of those weapon handling talents, brand bonuses, or weapon mods. Switching gears to headshot damage. Most of the brand bonuses for these got nerfed. However, the gear sets that give headshot damage also give handling and are just as strong as they've always been. So just use those and avoid headshot damage brand bonuses. Just use your minor attributes for this. Now going to blue bonuses. Explosive resist is still useless. As far as I know, it doesn't apply to your shield. Building around this only defeats a super niche threat that can also pull out their normal weapon and shoot you. Not to mention explosives are a very small minority of enemies. The brand bonuses give a lot, so maybe use it for a specific stage in a mission or raid, but other than that, don't use explosive resistance. Hasbro is a bit better since it applies to more situations, so you can definitely build for it if you wish. That being said, except for certain situations, you should be able to avoid basically all status effects through minimal playstyle tweaking, so I wouldn't expect many people to be running this. Your most efficient source is Cheshka, since you'll probably want the Cheshka first bonus anyway. You could also use 511 or Xena if you can go that deep on those brand bonuses. Armor on kill got a bit of a buff with the release of Uzina and especially Palisades. Uzina is inefficient with the 5% total armor, considering that even the last armor core that you put on, which is the least efficient, still gives about 11% total multiplicative armor. Notice that is more than double the 5% armor. An armor core is much more efficient than 5% total armor. Not to mention an armor core's insane synergy with shields. Palisades is a good set that actually reveals something that I hadn't thought about too much. If you think about it, this kind of shows that the preservation weapon talent is pretty weak, especially in light of the recent buffs to other weapon talents. Preservation is actually 12% armor on kill, not the 10% that it says on the tin, but that's still only 1.2 times the brand bonus. If you hit a headshot, that's 2 times the brand bonus. Either of these would equate to a 1.8 or 3 times a minor attribute. That's not very good. It's passable if you're a sniper and always hitting headshots, but otherwise it's pretty mid. And this reminds me of something else I've noticed. Oftentimes, agents have touted the MOP named weapon as a good weapon. However, the MOP gives up 10% multiplicative damage, the damage to targets out of cover, for 10% armor on kill. This is a similar trade-off between death grips and foxes. Who would ever run the death grips over the foxes? Nobody. And foxes only gives 8% detox. They both have a dead brand bonus, but give unique bonuses for their minor attributes. This comparison has gotten more complicated because of health, which we'll look at in a bit. So the mop isn't very good. If you want armor on kill, run Palisades, Bellstone, Uzina, or Death Grips. Health attributes got big buffs, and these are surprisingly efficient. 511 gives about 56% of an armor core in health. 3 pieces of Cheshka gives you about 1.7 armor cores worth. Now the problems with health are still apparent. They don't synergize with any talents or repair. That's a big drawback. The exception is Hunter's Fury, so Death Grips might be goated for Hunter's Fury. You can use it to tank a couple of extra bullets. I'm assuming that would make health a really good attribute for PvP, but I don't PvP, so I'm not going to speak too confidently on that. In general, I'd probably stay away from health for PvE, and definitely don't use health minor attributes. They are absolute dumpster tier in terms of efficiency. As far as armor regen minors go, you've already heard me rag on these in almost every video. Don't use these. Use brand bonuses, repair talents, or memento, or all three. Alright, finally, on to skill attributes. Incoming repairs only applies to repairs done to you by skills from any source. The brand bonuses took a bit of a hit, but the mods continue to be super efficient. If you can have a viable build that gets to the 45% from Bellstone, more power to you, but that's going to be a bit of an ask. And this is kind of a recurring theme that we'll come back to, and I've alluded to throughout the video. I'll tell you about it in a bit. Repair skills also took a hit for the 1-piece bonus, but the 2-piece bonus for something like Murakami doesn't make up for it. At 35%, it's hitting higher than the 1.5 times ratio that we want, but in order to get that, you need to have skill duration, which only applies to one healing skill in any measurable way, the chem. So that introduces some inefficiency. This is the recurring theme that we're talking about. Murakami would work for a skill damage heal hybrid build, so maybe that has some potential with kinetic momentum or something, but still, it's a lot to invest. Alps, at the very least, is going to give a lot to the chem launcher with a lot of duration and haste, but again, this is just one skill. Brazos also faces the same problem. The skill haste is basically a dead stat, highly inefficient, and isn't needed on all skills. However, the skill tier definitely makes up for it on a hybrid build. Unfortunately, Picaro's is very inefficient now, unless you're going for that skill tier with the second Brazos piece. A good portion of the name items also got hit with a nerf to their 1-piece bonus, making it harder to justify putting multiple named items on one build. This hits everything from the Emperor's Guard knee pads to the Door Kicker's knock chest piece. 2 named items that came out on the better side of this were the Hollow Man mask and the Motherly Love gloves. The Hollow Man got a huge boost to its damage to health attribute, which now brings it above Contractors and Foxes. Its 2-piece bonus also got a boost, so now it's like a Fenris or Sokolov that applies to any weapon type. This is more efficient than it was, but still not necessarily more efficient than other options. The biggest problem is its competition with Coyote's mask, which gives crit in a crit-starved gear system. However, if you're running an SMG and or a different exotic, this is going to be a great piece. Now for the Motherly Love gloves. Skill health is underrated for shield and decoy builds, and this piece gives a huge 25% bonus. Your first armor core gives about 38% multiplicative shield health, but after that it drops down and you won't ever exceed the multiplicative bonus that Motherly Love gloves gives. So run these 2 skills or run this with an Artificer and you are benefiting even from the Alps brand bonus as well. It is super efficient. Speaking of skill health, Empress got a bit of a nerf, only in the 3rd piece. Instead of 10%, it's now 8%. Remember that the skill efficiency attribute gives the value of the attribute to every skill attribute: damage, duration, health, haste, status effects, and repair skills. It's basically the weapon handling for skills, except a lot better. However, most skills only use 2 or 3 of these. Turrets and drones only really use damage and maybe health or duration. If it gets destroyed, then haste comes into play, but that's rare. Chems make the most use, with the heal chem benefiting from haste, duration, and repair skills. So we could say that since it's giving 8% of each of those, we're basically getting 24% total. That's not great if we compare to, say, 35% repair skills from the Murakami 2-piece. So now, Empress just isn't up to par anymore. Hannah Yu got a big buff for the 3rd piece, giving a full core's worth of weapon damage, but it's still hard to say if it's worth it. If you cut a skill build and want skill damage and skill haste, that's pretty much only pertains to explosive damage builds, in which case there are better options such as Grupo and China Light. Putting on 2-piece of China Light gives you a lot more skill haste, and if you still want the weapon damage, throw on 1-piece Walker and 1-piece weapon damage of the type that you want, such as Fenris. Even better, put on a 2nd piece of Walker instead for more damage to both your weapon and explosives, since explosive damage is increased by the damage to armor attribute against armor. Same thing applies to an Oxidizer build, which would increase in damage with DTA and damage targets out of cover. Even then, in that instance, Wyvern Wear might be the go-to with its massive skill duration bonus. If we just accept that skill haste on Hannah Yu is a dead stat, we can use it for a turret or drone damage build, but even then we're losing some efficiency in both the 1st and 2nd slot. So this is the problem that we keep seeing across all brand sets. Most of the bonuses are just too disjointed. This is especially problematic when most gear set bonuses are aligned and more powerful. This has always been an issue, but it was mitigated by the fact that we could take 1 piece and maybe 2 pieces from various sets that were mostly the same efficiency level to create a build that was aligned. Now, however, the 1-piece bonuses are almost all very inefficient, so this method doesn't work. The only alternative is to invest in 2 and 3-piece bonuses, but when we do that, it's still inefficient because the bonuses aren't aligned. To springboard off of that, usually there is an exotic that is very efficient that we also want on our build. That means we only have 5 more slots for brand bonuses, which means we can only get to 1 3-piece bonus, which is very efficient, on 1 brand set, and the other one we can only get to 2-piece bonus. So we're looking at having 2 very inefficient 1-piece bonuses, 2 maybe decently efficient 2-piece bonuses, and 1 very efficient 3-piece bonus, and an exotic that is very efficient, but inevitably at least 2 of those bonuses somewhere in that mix will be completely dead, since almost no brand set has perfect alignment, decreasing the rest of the build's efficiency. The devs really need to align things if brand set builds are going to make a comeback. So with that in mind, we've already discussed most of the brand sets, so let's wrap up the efficiency thought experiment with some conclusions. The only real survivors of the Title Update 22 brand set bonus changes are the blue core sets based around repairs and regen. Palisades and Bellstone are very efficient. The new Zoo brand set is also pretty good, as are the named items Death Grips, Foxes, Contractors, Hollow Man, and Motherly Love Gloves. Most of the other brand sets are pretty bad, and the only reason to use one of them would be to support a skill build or a skill build hybrid that utilizes a skill that isn't directly supported by a gear set. So any skill that isn't a status effect that boosted by Ortiz or Eclipse, or a damage with a cooldown that's negated by Hardwired, etc. There are already so many weapon damage gear sets and tank gear sets to use that it's virtually impossible for brand set builds to compete on those grounds. The only skill that I can think of off the top of my head that would fit the bill is the Oxidizer. Let me know if you'd like me to theorycraft one of these builds in a future video, or if you can think of another skill that will work for a brand set. Alright agents, so those are the updates to build efficiency with Title Update 22 in the Division 2. I'm sorry that it's not as clear cut as it was back when I put together the original video. Things have gotten a lot more complicated since then. I really think the devs essentially ruined brand sets. They went halfway there like a rocket getting halfway to space. It's just come back down and exploded. Do you disagree with my findings? Do you have a brand set build that you want us to analyze in the next video? Put it all down below and let's discuss. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Thumbs up the video and don't forget to subscribe, and if you dislike the video, I know you all will thumbs down and rip me a new one in the comments. Thanks for learning with me, agents. Until next time, this has been Dispatch. Take care out there.